أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. To His Eminence Sheikh Muhammad Lamin Bara, General Khalif of the Murid community. To His Holiness Cheikh Sayyid Al Mukhtar Serigne Cheikh Mbacke. To His Eminence Cheikh Ahmadul Mokhtar Mbacke, under the leadership of the Daira of the grandsons and great-grandsons of Sheikh Mohammed Moustapha, Serigne Cheikh Madina Mbacke, and Serigne Cheikh Abdul Fattah Gaynde Fatma Mbacke. We greet you with the greetings of peace and salutations. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. We are honored on this great day to celebrate the life and works of Sheikh Muhammad Moustapha, first Khalif of Sheikh al-Khadim. We celebrate his life and his work after 65 years from the time he departed from this world. It is long overdue, and it is high time that we, as Muslims, as Murids, revisit the conditions under which the stability, the philosophical cohesiveness, and the spiritual base of the Murid community was maintained in those hard times. Sheikh Muhammad Moustapha was a man of great intelligence, a gatherer, a man of firm conviction, a man of commitment, and a man of bold determination. Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, in reality, is a yardstick by which you measure the life and work of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, of Sheikh Muhammad Moustapha, excuse me. Allow me to revisit, just in 3 to 4 minutes, the great confrontation that took place between Khadim Rasul and the French colonial power. Because unless you know what happened between the French colonial power, which persecuted one man, one unarmed man, between 1895 to 1927, unless you know the context and conditions under which this man was persecuted, you cannot begin to even understand the conditions under which the mission of Sheikh Muhammad Moustapha was fulfilled. So in 3 minutes, allow me to remind you that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was the man who was deported in Gabon in 1895. The very first confrontation that took place, which was the colonial intent to begin with was the mere liquidation, the physical liquidation of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba in the land of Gabon. And for this reason, they buried him alive in a 7 feet hole in 1895. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a tale, this is not fiction, this was a fact that was recorded by the French colonial power themselves. And I read the writings of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, who said, Radama Rabbi ma aduwiya hafar lidarari wasanani aman kafar. This was a fact, this was not a tale, this is not something that the Moorists are engaged in propagating. Second, he was transferred to Mayomba. We know this was a fact. It was in Mayomba that indeed the French colonial power attempted to burn this man alive. And we can read on the chef's recordings and archives. This was a fact. Remember this. The third thing was that the French colonial power was engaged in a deadly confrontation, which was the fire squad that took place in Gabon after Libreville, after Mayomba, after Lambaréné, and back in Libreville. The Sheikh said he was the subject of a fire squad, and this was a fact. The Sheikh reads this by saying, he wrote it by saying, وَهَبَ لِلْوَهَابُ فِي سُلَاسَ مَا يُخْجِلُ الْعَشْرَةَ وَسَلَاسَ. So this was a fact that took place in Gabon that today no Muslims, no historians, no archivist, no sociologist is able to discover, because the archives simply vanished. It was this man's legacy, it was this man's heritage that Sheikh Mohammed al-Moustapha was engaged in pursuing. After this, they returned to Senegal, to Mauritania, to Cayenne, back to right here in Diourbel, when he was under surveillance residency for 15 years. 15 years of persecution that took place. And we know the French were engaged in an orchestration to take the body of Cheikh al-Khadim to France. And I'm going to illustrate this later. After 15 years, the Sheikh departed from this earth, was taken to Touba under the leadership of Sheikh Mohammed al-Moustapha. Then and only then began the great project of Touba as we know it today. If Sheikh Mohammed al-Moustapha failed his mission in 1927, today you and I would not be able to either engage in a Magal or in a Gammu or in any other kind of Muslim celebration, because the French were engaged to disrupt the power base, dismantle the Mirror community, and lived on as they did it in the past. So today, we are celebrating a man who engaged in the construction of a railway system, 40 kilometers, engaged 1,500 men, put into funds over 400 million francs those days, probably 40 billion francs today or more. This was a community that neither had oil, nor had diamonds, nor had gold, nor had any other natural resources, but they were mere peasants who used to go back and forth and engage in the cultivation of the farms. This, my friends, today is what we're celebrating. A faith, commitment, conviction, organization, philosophical cohesiveness, and indeed success in this world and the next. Mbokk yi ngeen dimbale ma sànni ci ñetti baat ci wolof ndax mënta ñàkk. 500 millions de personnes yuy wax anglais laa doon waxal moo tax ngeen wax ma fii ngeen woomoo ñuy wax anglais waaye du amaana du len nag ci mbooloo mi toog fii bu ñuy invité presse internationale ñu xam ne mandarin 1 milliard de personnes, anglais 500 millions de personnes, espagnol 400 millions de personnes, hindustani 300 millions de personnes, arabe topp ci russe topp ci malay topp ci bengali topp ci français soog cee topp nanu xam ni ñuy vulgariser la vie et l'œuvre du cheikh à travers le réseau médiatique. Wasalaamualeykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
jërëjëf.